Another session we will have towards the end of September is Happy as a Pig in Muck. This is related to the current session. If you are an integration services user, then what you will find is that Pig is probably something you would be interested in. We will be looking at how to take data that's structured and unstructured and put that into different data stores. So if you're interested at all in transferring data, which I guess you must be, then I recommend that session. So just a few notes before we get started. So a few pass. Now this webinar is courtesy of the Professional Association of SQL Server, and it's also sponsored by Pragmatic Works, who very generously provide books and some help, some sponsorship help, so that we can have these webinars. So I think if we can have a look at the website, that would be a good thing. But in the meantime, every year they have what they call the Passion Award, and it's given to an outstanding member of the community who gives a lot of assistance and help in order to help the community grow. Now I have a particular attachment to this award because I'm the current winner. I won it last year. So I'm really happy to announce that they're looking for a new awardee this year. You hold the award for 1 year. So if you can nominate somebody, then the award is Passion Award 2013 at sqlpass.org. And one final note, I'm attending Pass Summit 2013, which is in Charlotte in North Carolina, and it's actually next month, which is really nice to see. So I hope to see you there. If you are going, please tweet up so we can meet. It would be nice to meet you all. And in case you are thinking of attending, we have a special discount code for attendees of the Business Intelligence Virtual Chapter, and the discount code is BIVC, and you get $200 off. So that can't be a bad thing. Okay, please silence cell phones. That's not for you, that's for me. Okay, so now back to the session. Now, what is Hive? Hive is like SQL, actually. It's a structured language that you use in order to query big data sources. Specifically, we'll be using it for Hadoop. Now, a lot of people have got different experience with the software, so I think what we ought to do is take quite an introductory session, and then what we will do is have something more detailed another time. When I speak to people about it, they're not really always sure what it is. So let's have a look at that now. So what is Hive? Well, Hive is a solution to a business problem. Businesses have larger and larger increasing amounts of data all the time, and data scientists in particular want to study this data, do something with it, and businesses want to reap the benefit from the findings of the data. So what Hive does is it structures data into tables, and that's quite a very interesting thing, because what's so interesting about Hadoop is that it can hold unstructured data as well as structured data, and that's something that is a relational database person that's really quite exciting. So Hive structures data into tables, which we find more easy to communicate with and to understand. It structures tables in HDFS, which is basically the file store where Hadoop stores data. So Hive is a very high-level language that basically allows you to interrogate the data store. It allows you to use business intelligence in big data. I'm actually quite a fan of thinking that if you want to use business intelligence, that you have to really be able to do something with that. So what I'm also interested in is how to make the most of that data if we can at all. So how we can make cross correlations, for example, joins and filters, how we can make them more easy. Okay, whoops, here we are. back again, sorry. So what's the purpose of Hive? Well, it really allows you to have a data warehousing system for Hadoop. It is a very interesting method because it allows you business people to understand the data, and it allows data scientists, analysts and BI professionals to see the data as well. So this summarises data because data on its own needs to be made sense of. It's not just about the context. It's quite difficult to just simply understand the data. If it's very, very molecular and very atomic, people usually want summaries. They want to understand how many they sold of something, for example. So what we're also interested in, is analysing the data and analysing large data sets stored in Hadoop file systems. I'm just going to swap this over. That's probably better, you can see that better. So the SQL-like query language is called HiveQL, excuse my pronunciation. And what it does do is it allows you to create map reduce jobs behind the scenes. Now what is map reduce? Map reduce is a situation where a query is breaks up the data into small chunks, and it works on those chunks, and then the chunks are unified at the end and aggregated in order to give you the answer that you are looking for. So here we have an example here. So these yellow boxes here would be the examples of our chunks of data. The way that I look at this is the queries are broken up and parallelized. What I mean by that is it's a bit like a shopping queue. So if you have a shopping queue where you have only one person at the checkout and then a really long queue. So what happens is you get a second checkout opened. When that happens, the queue halves, because some of the members of the first queue will go and join the second queue. Then what we find is you open a third checkout and each queue decreases again. And MapReduce is a bit like that. So if you can imagine, because the jobs or the queues are being broken up in a certain way, they were actually allowing the query to be parallelized across different nodes. And that's really useful for churning out data more quickly. The thing is that Hive is not particularly for queries where you are expecting a result very, very quickly. It's more for your overnight jobs, which you may crunch through a lot of data overnight, or there's quite a long latency in getting the result. That's because you are looking at a lot of data and your queries themselves might be quite intensive. So once you have created your Hive job, you then can filter these data and put it in your data warehouse, for example. You could also use R with it as well. Probably some of you use an open source project called R. It's basically a statistical package. And what you could do then is use your data and analyze it using R. A lot of people use R, I think, already. So you could use R, or alternatively, you could put the data into your data warehouse and then use it to initiate self-service BI by allowing the data to be given to a cube or perhaps given over to a Power Pivot or a tabular model. That's one way of doing it. What you could do as well is perhaps look at ways you could access that data store more directly, and that's something I'd like to show you as well. Okay, so why would you use Hive? Now, Hive is not a replacement for SQL, and we'll have a look at that, but I would think it's important that you have some context over why Hive is actually useful. So can't you just simply use Hadoop to solve the business problem of large data? Why do you need Hive at all? Well, the thing is that writing MapReduce jobs in Java or Hadoop streaming is actually quite difficult and quite complex. And you don't actually know if anything has gone wrong until the job has fallen over. And if your Hive queries are taking a long time, you could perhaps go home for the evening and then realise that your query hasn't worked until you come in the next day. And of course, that's when the business people are wanting their data. They want it right away. So that's problematic as well. Also, joining large data sets can be quite difficult as well. The other thing is as well, there can be quite a learning curve if you are a business intelligence person and you are then starting to think about having to write Java. You can't be an expert at everything as much as we try, and the thing is that Hive is a halfway house. It allows you to create map reduce jobs behind the scenes simply by it translates the SQL queries into a map reduce job, and it does some of the hard work for you. Okay, so we'll have a quick look at history of Hive. Sorry about that. Let's come back. So one company that does use Hive a lot is Facebook. The history is that Hive was built by Facebook to analyse and query their plus or minus 15 terabyte log file every day. They needed to analyse their data for reporting purposes and for tweaking adverts as well. So at Facebook, the data was collected by nightly cron jobs, C-R-O-N, sorry my accent, into an Oracle database. And then they did a lot of ETL work using hand-coded Python. And the data just grew and grew and grew, until eventually in 2007, they were generating a new terabyte of new data a day. And now they generate much more data than that per day. So what they found then is by using Hive, they could actually analyse the queries in a way that was more comfortable for the users. If you're interested, you can go and look in Facebook and see how they use Hive. And if you're interested in Pig, you might be interested to know that Yahoo use a lot of Pig and to throw data around. So if you look on the Yahoo websites, they actually tell you how they use Hive as well. So there's a lot of very interesting things going on. Okay. Another company that uses Hive is Netflix. There might be some Netflix users online. Netflix use Hive in order to conduct scalable log analysis for the engineers, and they also use Hive for their business intelligence as well. So they use it for CDN performance. They work out things like the number of streams they have a day, the number of errors per film session, and they also use it to test the cells that are actually delivering the media out to the users. They also use Hive for ad hoc query analysis, things like raw log inspection. They might examine one particular stream session as well, if it was very problematic, for example. And they also do simple summaries as well. So they might want to know things like the percentile, the count, the min and max of operational metrics. So Netflix had some issues as well. They had some issues around the Hive UI. You can use the command prompt in order to run Hive queries. I'm going to show you a method of querying Hive which is called HU, which is Hadoop User Interface. And basically you emit Hive queries in a web interface which connects to Hadoop. Okay, so just to summarise, we've seen that Facebook and Hive will use, Facebook and Netflix use Hive in order to do a number of things, namely log processing, predictive modelling, and business intelligence, which is our main interest here. Okay, so you might be thinking, well, if Hive and Hadoop are all open source, why don't I just replace my SQL instances with Hadoop and Hive? And I understand there might be a temptation to do that, particularly if you are looking at reviewing your estate due to licensing changes in SQL Server, for example. I would say that they do quite different things in some way. Hive is for large data sets which can be unstructured. Hive imposes a structure on your data so that you can query it, but some of that data underlying it might be unstructured. We know that relational databases hold only structured data. So Hive, there's also a latency in starting the job in the first place. That's because it has to take your query and then translate it to MapReduce, so it takes extra time. At this point in time, Hive doesn't cache data, SQL Server does. So SQL Server has an advantage in that way. Now also SQL Server, as we know, we can do lots of optimization when we execute SQL Server queries. But that doesn't really happen when we use Hive, because the performance tuning isn't conducted on the Hive query. It's actually conducted down at the Hadoop level. So for us, that would be a bit like the performance tuning only taking place in the SQL Server engine and not actually being able to do anything in the SQL Server query that would optimize or allow your query to run faster. So they have different architectures because they have different purposes. It's a bit like comparing a van and a truck. They both do different things, although they seem to do the same thing, and it's dependent on the features that they have. Okay, so we'll have a quick look at some of the constituents of Hive. Okay, so I'm going to show you some examples of Hive just so you can see how it looks. As I said before, it's for easy data summarization, which is what we want in business intelligence. We have to start with a high level and then dive down to the detail. We can do a number of things around very large data sets and fit structure onto that data in order to make it easier to understand. Oops, excuse me, sorry. Alright, so why are Hive queries like SQL queries? Well, there's some similarities in the syntax and the features. For example, we have select statements, we have from, where, group by, having, table aliases as well, and we also have computed columns. Oops, excuse me. I have one of these mice, which is a touch mouse, and unfortunately it seems really sensitive. Either that or my hands are really clumsy. So here's an example. We have a Hive query here. It's a very simple select statement. We select the column name, account as my count, which is the alias for the column, from table name, and it has a sorts by my count, and desc limit 10. Now basically desc limit 10 just means descending. Limit is actually top. So in SQL Server we say something like select top 10 column name from table name, and that's what limit does there. You're limiting the results to show you the top 10 of this particular count. So it's actually very, very similar to SQL. If you are a SQL Server, if you write queries, which I assume most of you do, then this Hive query is very similar and very familiar to you already. The point I wanted to make about Hive really is that Hive is not outside your reach. If you know SQL Server, you can springboard your existing SQL Server skills to include Hive and to include Hadoop as well. And when you look at something like this and think about how many select statements you must run in SQL Server all the time, then that's something that gives you a great start if you want to start looking at Hive, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Now here is a Hive query, and what this does is it is actually creating a table, and this is very familiar to what you would do in a SQL statement. This HiveQL statement for creating a table says create external table if not exists, which is familiar to us all, I think. Now this table name is called UNICEF report card, and basically you see the column name, such as country name. Here is the column name followed by the column type. So here we have string. We have average rank position is the column name, and then we have, that's a float data type. So you can probably see this quite easily. So now we have at the bottom it says row formats delimited. What that says is that the incoming file that Hive is imposing a structure on, it's actually a delimited file which is terminated by columns. Basically it's a CSV file that this particular Hive statement is imposing a structure on. We also have the location as well of the table. It just wants to know where are we wanting to structure that data, where are we going to put it. So here we have how are HiveQL queries like SQL queries, and here's a quick summary of some of the things that you can do. So here we have show tables. Show tables is just like SP help. So show tables on its own will list out all of the tables in your database. SP help gives you the information about a specific table, as you well know. Now you can also, SQL Help is a bit like describe table. Describe table is just simply where it tells you information about that table, and that's all it is. We've already seen creates table, which was creating a table, very simple. Now the second bottom one is loads data in path directory name into a table, and that's basically like insert to. All you're doing is taking the data and structuring a table structure on it and giving it a table name, and that's all that's happening there. So we have some other features as well. We have aggregate functions, so it has things like sum, count, and we also have average, sum, min and max. Now SQL Server does not have certain types of aggregate functions. It doesn't have variance, it doesn't do standards deviation, and it doesn't do sampling on its own. And it doesn't do percentile or correlation, but Hive actually does do its own inbuilt aggregate functions that are over and above count, average, sum, min and max. SQL Server doesn't have these very more interesting statistics such as variance, but Hive does. So it also has things like, we have like and are like, so that's basically when you're trying to do some text processing. We also have join as well. So there's some quite interesting things there if you want to do some more statistical analysis. So I thought we'd give you a comparison of the data types between Hive and SQL. So what we do here is we already know these data types for SQL Server, which are on the right hand side, and I want to show you their association in Hive. And straight away you will see that they are very, very similar to one another. So on the right hand side we have things like tiny int, small int and integer. And on the left hand side we have the Hive equivalent, which have pretty much got the same names. There's only some very small differences. So for SQL we have bit for Boolean, but we all are familiar with the Boolean concept anyway. So big decimal literals provide greater precision and range for floating point numbers, more so than the double date type. But they're needed for use cases in which the precision of a double is not sufficient, such as financial applications, or for cases that deal with numbers that are well outside the double range, or very close to zero. So the precision of a big decimal is not unlimited, but it is as close as you can get probably. Okay, so here's some other examples as well. We have string. In Hive we just simply have string as a data type, which is much more simple. In SQL Server obviously we have a range of data types to hold string. We have char, varchar, nvarchar, ntext and text in SQL Server. Hive we just have string and that's it. Really simple. Binary is the same. I did find that in SQL Server the timestamp for SQL was being deprecated and being replaced by row version. So that's something worth looking at. In Hive we simply have timestamp. Okay, so what I wanted to show you was just a very quick way of getting data from Hadoop using a bit of Hive, and then we'll look at it in Excel as well. So if you just bear with me, I need to swap screens and hopefully somebody will yell at me on Twitter if you can't see anything. Here we are. So what I wanted to show you is this. I hope you can all see that. It's I hope you like the halo background as well. I maybe should have changed that. But what I have actually is I downloaded this. It's a sandbox which you can get from the Hortonworks website. And what it does is, when you install the Hortonworks, what you get is you can actually access the virtual machine using its IP address, which is on here. Now, so if you want to download the Hortonworks sandbox, what you can do is you go to their website, which I've got here, and you're simply looking for down here, Hortonworks Sandbox. and we have it there. When you click on that, there's a whole range of different ways that you can download that. We have the install guide in the middle here. Now you can choose whether to use Hyper-V or whether to use VMware for your VirtualBox, if that's your preference. I just tend to use VMware just simply because that's something I'm more familiar with. Now, you can actually use HD Insight as well, HD Insight. And we have Hadoop and Azure, but actually the best way to get it is by signing up for it at Windows Azure. And when you do that, you can get a preview if you're not on it already. So what HD Insight gives you is a way of storing data on Azure and then running Hive queries on it using HD Insight. If you don't have a Windows Azure account, what you can do is download the Hortonworks Sandbox as well, because this is free and it's all configured for you, and you access it using the IP address. It does have some nice tutorials if you want to learn about some of these big data technologies, or you can just straight away use the sandbox, which is what we will start to do. So when we look at the Hortonworks Sandbox, it gives us an IP address which we connect using the browser, and it gives you a whole range of different ways in which to interact with the sandbox. So at the top we have Beeswax, which is the Hive UI, which is basically Hadoop user interface. Now Pig is here obviously, so if we click on the Hive one, what we do get here is a query editor on the right hand side. I'll take you through this and then I'll show you ways in which we can connect your virtual machine to Excel 2013 in order to analyse the data and put data there. So what we can do, it's a very, very quick query, is we will do show tables. Excuse my typing. Okay. So it comes up with all this stuff here. And what we have here is we can see we have two tables that are contained in the Hadoop file store. So we have sample 7 and sample 8. We can download the data here and you can run more queries on it if you like. This is really simple. What we can do is we can upload data as well. So we can go to here, which shows you tables. And we can see the tables that are actually stored in Hadoop at the moment. So if we click on sample 05, you can see the column name and the type here. So what happens if you want to actually see the queries that are being executed? Well, you can do that. We can go to history and you can see the queries that it's been asking for. So we have two show tables and one describe tables. Describe tables is essentially what we did when we looked at tables, then clicked on sample 07, and that gave us an insight into how the table is structured. When we go back, we can see the query in here, and this is one way in which you can start to learn to use Hive and learn to use the commands, because basically this interface is doing it for you. So now if we go back to Query Editor and say we do describe table, so say we try that, let's see if that will work. Oops, table not found table, and that's because I've put in describe table. But now if we do sample 07, it goes off and then it comes back with the same thing. So what this user interface does is Hue, which is one of the Apache open projects. It can help you very simply to query the data and to learn how to use it. So let's do star from sample 07. Whoops, excuse me. Just really simple examples. We execute it, and that gives you all the data there that you need. So what we can start to do is you can start to write more complex queries that will partition the data, and then you could then load this into a data warehouse. But all this, although these are very simple examples, how can you actually see this data in Excel and use it as a data source? Well, that's something that's quite easy to do, and I'll show you how to do that. What we have here, when we go to the Horton Sandbox page, is you can actually download, an Excel driver that will allow you to do that. HortonWorks download Excel. And then HortonWorks Sandbox. I'll see if I can quickly find the link for you. If not, something that I can put up for you later. Alright, I'm sorry I don't see it there. But what we will do is, I will send the link out for that later. Just so you can see it. But what happens is, we have an ODBC driver that basically connects Excel to Hortonworks, and you can install it, and when you have installed it, you can access the data using Excel. So the way that we do that, go to Data, and then what we do is we actually use Microsoft Query in order to access the sandbox. So what we do is we go from other sources, from Microsoft Query, which is the one down the bottom. I think you can see it there. That's it. So we want the one that's right at the bottom here, from Microsoft Query. That's the one you want to use. And what we have here is SampleWorks Hortonworks Hive DSN. Now when you install the Hortonworks Hive ODBC driver for Excel, there are two versions for it. There are 64-bit and there's 32-bit. Make sure that you download the correct version. If you don't download the correct version, you won't see it in here. And you'll wonder why that is, because when you test the ODBC connection, it says it works perfectly, but it doesn't. So it's a very small thing, but just be aware that that could be a problem. So we're going to choose the data source as the sample Hortonworks Hive DSN, and that points at the sandbox, which we see here, which is running on Linux actually. So we will leave that. We'll click OK. It connects to the data source. Now if you're wanting to download the sandbox, I recommend that you do it. It's about 2 gig in size, but the thing is that it's free, whereas if you sign up for HD Insight, it's not free after the 3-month trial. And if you just want to learn how to use Hive, it's a very quick and easy and free way in order to do that. So here we have our example here. We have sample 07, code and description. We have the columns in here. And then we can start to filter on these columns if we wanted. We don't want to do that though. We can sort as well if you like. So we'll sort the code. We click on Next. And then we just simply want to return the data to Microsoft Excel. Just thinking about it. Still thinking about it. Okay, we'll give it a few more seconds, and if not, we'll go back to the sandbox. We'll have a look there. Hey, there we go. Existing worksheet, and we will put it there. And that will be us. We'll have loaded our data from the sandbox into Excel. Just thinking about it. Alright, so while that data is loading, what I will do is show you how to get data onto the sandbox. Oh, there we are. Hello. Back again. Alright, so how do you... This data is actually some of the default data that comes with the sandbox. These are just very simple examples, but what you can do then is, because you have it in Excel 2013, which is what we have here, I'm using Office 365, so I have Power View, for example. So I could then, if I want, create a Power View on this particular item and do some analysis there, and that would be really nice for the business user to be able to do that, because they don't want necessarily to know about all this stuff in the sandbox down here. They may not necessarily be very interested in what happens underneath, but they will want the data so that they can go and make decisions based on that. So what we can do is we can go back to the sandbox here, and I'll show you how to get data into the sandbox. So what we can do, we can load data in. And so what we can do is create table from a file and create a new table manually. I've got another table of data here, which I will show you. Sorry about that. This is it here. So what I'm going to do is this data is from UNICEF and the World Bank. It's from places like that, and I've just collected the data up just because I'm interested to see what the data actually says. I want to see where this data is, so I'm going to save it on my hard drive. We'll save it on my desktop just now, and then we can upload it into the sandbox and create a table using it. Sorry, it's slow and I don't know why. It's thinking about it still. I hate when this happens. It always seems to happen when I have an audience. Oh, here we are. So save as. And so I'm just going to put it in the computer, and we will put it on the desktop just for just now. Okay. Alrighty, there we go. So now when we go back to Hive, we'll create a new table from a file. So we'll give it a name. We'll call it pass BIVC. You can give it description as well. My description goes here. That's something we can do in SQL anyway. When we're creating a table, you can start to have a look at it and add descriptions in there. So then we have the input file. So we're going to upload a file, and then we will go and see if we can create this table and upload it here. Okay, so you might see this down the bottom. The selected file is going to be moved during the input. So what that actually means is the data will be logged into a directory called user, then Hue, and then it'll be logged into this location here. And the reason for that is when Hive structures a data structure on this particular table, it will then move it into its own data warehouse location, which will be a different path from this one. It will be something like user, Hue, and then data warehouse as an additional directory. So what we will do is we will do it next. Oops, that wasn't very good, was it? So let's try and see if we can save up a CSV. It's not very happy with that. So let's see if we can find another file quickly. Let's see if we can do a recent file. Open, and then see if we can find another file that's more recent. Let's try this one, HDI. Okay, so if we save this file as a CSV, maybe that would be better. Maybe it can't read the Excel very well. So we will going to save that as a CSV, and it's down here. Okay, and I'm going to save it on my desktop as well, which is a shame because I quite like that halo background. Now, in case you're interested, HDI is Human Development Index, and what we want to do is take the CSV file and see how that changes over time. And what I love about this is you can start to do spark lines, so you can see how the human development has increased since 1980. We won't do that now though, that's me getting excited about visualising the data, and maybe we'll see if we've got time to do that at the end. But for the moment I better finish what I started, which was to upload this file into the sandbox. So I'm going to choose a new file. Let's upload a new one, and we'll do HDI, which is a CSV file. And let's see Now here we are, that's better, it's been a bit happier there. So it's obviously got the column names in here. Now normally we would just take those out. If this was SQL Server, then we would, if we were doing the SSIS, the little wizard, we would just specify that the column names were held in the first row. But because this is Hive, it just takes the data that it sees, and then we will change the column types and the column names afterwards. It's given us a preview of what it thinks the table actually is. So now we will do next. We would preview the data, seems quite happy there. So we can change the column names in here. So I think we can call column name as the rank. It says it's a string. We'll leave everything as a string just now, but we can change it. You can see the data types I was talking about here. These are very familiar to us if we are SQL Server users anyway. So, and then we've got HDI rank. We've got country name, we'll call it country. And then we'll call that one 1980, and that one will be 1990. Now it's a shame we don't have time, but we could have used something like Data Explorer in order to, not Data Explorer, Power Query, in order to transform this data, and so that our year was all in one column, because you can see here that it's not. But unfortunately when we're dealing with data, we get data in all sorts of formats, and I'm absolutely sure everybody listening has got gets the same issue from time to time. Okay, so we'll put that in as 2012. I can't really see it on my screen, but never mind. Okay, so it's gone off to think about it, and so far things are looking good. So what we have here, we've got the column names down here, which is just done in string order, and then we can see a sample of the data as well, and that's our data going into the sandbox. Now if this was HD Insight and you were using Azure, you'd probably have to pay to store the data and access it, transfer it, and that's between you and the Azure account. I just simply use the sandbox because it's a free and really easy way to get myself up and running and learning this stuff really quickly. So what we will do, you can sort it as well. So what we'll do now is we'll go back to Excel and we will take that data. I'll close that one. There we are. So let's start up a new sheet. Let's do a new one. Okay, we have a blank workbook. And we will connect to the Hortonworks sandbox, and then we've got that data which we can then visualize. So go to Data, go from Other Sources, Microsoft Query. We found our Hortonworks driver, we click OK. And this time when we connect to the data source, we see we've got our table, Past BI VC. We're going to take the whole thing across, and we're not going to filter in anything because we quite like that where it is. We've still got that strange first row with column names in it. I don't know if we can take that out. I'll leave that just now, but that's something that would have been nice to think about. I'm going to cancel that and start again because I think it's going to start querying by the rank. Hello? Here we are. So from Other Sources, Query, I shouldn't have started playing with things. Take Past BI VC, throw that over there. Do next. I'll leave the filtering alone. We'll sort by the rank this time. Click Next. Return data to Excel. Oops. Okay, so it didn't like something about. Let's see if we can view the data. Alright, OL, error processing statement. Okay. Let's see if we can try that again. If not, I'm sorry, we'll have to leave that. That'd be a real shame. I don't want to take up everyone's time if it's not working. Right, so from Sources, Microsoft Query, Sample Hortonworks, connect to the source, and we'll take that across. Now it said it didn't like that one, but I'll leave it alone just now. Won't sort this time. Let's see if I just see if I can take that one out just now. See if that would help us. No, it doesn't like something about those years, does it? I'm sorry, I'll just have to leave that just now. We'll try and go back and have a look at our previous example. Okay, so what we have here, so I'm sorry that that didn't work. I don't have time to look at it just now, but we'll have a quick look at the sandbox. I'll take you through some final things, and then we'll close off for today in the event that we have any questions. And if I find out what caused that issue, I'll blog about it. My blog is at jenstirrup.com, which is here. Now, I've been doing a series called Eating the Elephant One Bite at a Time, and what I've been doing is trying to help people to learn Hive. So if you are interested, what you can do is just work your way through these examples that I've got in my blog. I've used the query editor, so you can see how to basically how to import data and start to query it. And I've got some examples as well, which I have given you on the site. And there's quite a lot of information there about partitioning a SQL Server. What I've tried to do is give people with a SQL Server background some knowledge they can springboard from in order to use that information to start to use Hive as well. So when we go back to this table here, we can do some sorting on it as well. And you can drop the table too. Now, if you do drop the table, it drops the metadata about the table and also all of the data as well. You can view the file location too. Now we have imported this data. Now normally when you import data it goes into Hive, but when you make a table, you get two types of tables in Hive. You get an internal table and an external table. An internal table is something that Hive has control over, and it sits in this directory here, but an external table is something that other types of data can access it, such as the ones outside of Hive, and the external tables are something you probably end up using more often. Okay, so I'll just go back one last thing to my slides, and then we'll have a quick wrap up. Okay, display settings, here we go. Okay, so downsides of Hive is that Hive is a solution, but it's not a solution to everything. So if your organisation is looking at big data, it's worth having a look to see whether they are using a solution, but looking for a problem. So what you can see here is that Hive is very good in terms of developer productivity. It's something you can learn and pick up to use quite easily. If you download the sandbox and download the examples there, it's something you can learn to use pretty quickly. It won't take you very long. But because it is so oriented towards helping the developer, unfortunately, that's at the expense of efficiency, because it's got to translate your query into map reduce jobs behind the scenes. So some technical downsides. Hive does deal with queries in batch mode, so you won't get your answers very quickly often. Unlike SQL Server, it's not a mature product. SQL Server has been going for some time. I know I've personally been using SQL Server since 1997, that I can remember. So that's been a long time, 15, 16 years. So the query optimizer and the compiler are only a few years old, so of course you might still run into issues. Okay, so and if you want to enhance your query, then you have to learn about the underlying engine to do that, to make your queries more effective. Okay, so I don't know if anyone has got any questions. I haven't seen any pop up, I don't think. Someone's just asked for the link of the recorded webinar. Yes, I can do that. Okay, so I think I'm starting to see. I can't read the questions very well, I'm sorry, the writing is tiny. Right. Okay, someone said hello, which is nice. Okay, so someone has asked me, do I prefer the Hortonworks versus HD Insight? I think I like the Hortonworks for learning with, but I am speaking with customers at the moment about HD Insight, and they're looking towards HD Insight as a valid tool for their business insights. And the reason for that is when you have Microsoft HD Insight, you have the whole package. You have Azure, you can host your data, or alternatively, you could have your data on-premise and use a downloadable version of HD Insight, which is on one of your local servers. So you don't have to just have HD Insight on Azure. And I think because you have the familiarity, it is Microsoft, there's a large corporation, if you like, behind it, which you can go and get support from, and there's a very lively community as well. So I think I tend to use whatever I think is the best tool for the job. So I've been using Hortonworks for learning, but my customers are speaking to me and I'm speaking to them about HD Insight and working with some of them on that. And I think that's the difference at the moment for me personally. That may change. Hortonworks is showing a lot of strong growth in Europe, and certainly I think it just comes back to use the best tool for the job. I'm going to go through. What's this link of the recorded webinar? Yes, I'm going to post up the recording. You'll be able to get that from bi-SQLpass.org, and I will show you that. I'm just going to end the slideshow. Oops, come back. So bi-SQLpass.org. There we go. And we put all of the presentations archive under presentation archive here. So I will probably put that up at some point today. I need to finish the file and make sure it has turned out all right first. But that's where you find everything basically. bi-SQLpass.org presentation archive. Let's see if I've got any other questions. Okay. Right, I'm sorry some of you didn't see the resolution properly. I'll post up the slides and hopefully you can have a look at those as well. So with that I will stop the recording. I wanted to show you just so if you are interested, we have another presentation on which will be held in the 12th of September. It's not myself that's hosting it, and I'll just post the details back up for you, just so you've got those. Okay, and it's Peter Welling. So it's Peter Welling who is going to be talking about Power Map, and if you're interested, I would go and watch his session when you're there. Alright, with that, thank you very much everybody. I hope you have a great afternoon, evening or morning, wherever you happen to be in the world. Thanks again. Bye.